I didn't set out to trade vows for invoices or memories for a receipt printed on thin, curling thermal paper that would fade with time the way a bruise fades, slowly, stubbornly, never fully gone. But there I was in a pawn shop off Jefferson Avenue, the kind of place that hums with a constant fluorescent flicker, like a failing heartbeat, handing over the brightest thing I owned. 2 rings, one plain, one crowded with tiny diamonds that once caught the sun and threw it back like confetti. The man behind the glass had nicotine stains on his fingers and a calculator older than my marriage. He tapped numbers like he was chiseling a headstone. I watched him weigh the past in grams and price it in dollars that would be eaten by daycare fees before the week finished breathing. I told myself I was doing something brave, something clean. I lied to myself about the symbolism, how I was letting go, how I was choosing my son over a promise that had turned thin as tissue. But the truth sounded smaller. I was late. Again. 2 weeks behind. Then 3. Daycare had a waiting list out the door, and if we lost our spot, my job would swallow itself like a snake eating its tail, and there'd be nothing left of me but apologies. I could hear the director's voice from the last time she called. Bright, professional, firmly kind. We do what we can, but we can't carry a balance forever, Ms. Hale. Ms. Hale. My maiden name dragged out like an old trunk I hadn't meant to open. I spread my fingers on the glass and tried to recognize the person they belonged to. Those rings had been my armor when I was 22 and said I do, under a sky that felt like a roof God forgot to put on. Back then, I believed vows were a fence you could build around a life, and inside it things would be safe. Now I understood fences keep some things out, the easy things, the ones that knock. The worst things find a way in. Silence, disappointment, someone else's temper walking around on the tips of its toes until it suddenly isn't. When the pawnbroker slid the plastic bin toward me to deposit the rings, I felt something that surprised me. A tremor of relief. Relief that I could finally stop pretending. Relief that at least the math made sense here. Metal weighed, metal paid. I told him my name was Rachel. It is. He told me his was Terry, like we were about to be friends. He offered me more if I sold the matching pendant. You got the cluster? Sometimes they do a cluster. He smiled without warmth and waited to see if humiliating me would make me generous. I said no. It wasn't a lie. There was no cluster, just these 2 circles. One large, one small. The history of my life reduced to geometry. He counted out cash, and I felt the paper, soft and exhausted from having been touched by too many hands. I put it inside the front pocket of my backpack, next to the Ziploc holding 3 crayons, a small plastic dinosaur, and a graham cracker that had quietly disintegrated into dust. Before I left, he told me, "You can buy them back, 30 days. Tickets stapled to the receipt." I nodded like someone who believes in 30 days. But I knew the truth. Those rings were going to be transformed into breakfast milk, a tiny pair of rain boots, and 10 hours of safe play behind a keypad door. They were going to become 2 naps and a snack time that didn't depend on whether the universe liked me that week. I thanked him, because women thank people while we are bleeding out, and stepped into the dull afternoon, where the air smelled like wet cardboard and diesel. I tightened my grip on the strap, crossed the street, and timed my breathing with the crosswalk's blinking countdown. 10, 9, 8. I whispered with the numbers. Every second a choice, every step a confession. I had sold my wedding rings to pay for daycare, not because I am a martyr, because I am a mother. And still, that night, when the story leaked out, the way stories do, like water through drywall, someone looked at me, mouth tilted like a blade, and said, "So what? You're playing the victim now. If you're new here, my name is Rachel Hale." I rent a second-floor walk-up in Riverbend, a neighborhood outside Milwaukee that smells like coffee beans on Tuesdays, when the roastery vents its secrets into the street. My son, Jonah, is 3. He loves trucks with a devotion that borders on religious. He thinks every siren is singing to him personally. He sleeps with one hand open, as if he's holding a dream by the tail. I work the early shift at a grocery store bakery that still pretends bread is magic and not an assembly line of frozen dough. We start at 5. We finish when the rack says we're done. I wear a name badge and an elastic smile, and I've learned how to make myself invisible when the morning rush rolls in like rain. Deliveries, coffee, impatient men who tap their phones on the counter like detonators, and women who order scones for book club as if scones can mend the world. Maybe you've heard versions of this story before. Rings for rent, heirlooms for groceries, a mother deciding which bill not to pay. Maybe you're tired of it. Maybe it claws at something in you that you'd rather not name. Maybe your instinct is to ask where the father is, as if my motherhood requires permission slips signed in someone else's handwriting. I've asked myself that question too, more times than I'll admit, standing with my head against the refrigerator door at midnight like it's a confessional that hums in absolution. The short answer is, he left the marriage before our lease was up. The longer answer is, there are departures you can see coming down the road, and there are departures that happen while someone is still in the room. This is not a story about him. That's the first revelation I have to give you. If you're watching from a place where you've been taught to hunt for villains because villains make stories easier to swallow, I promise you, there will be moments when you'll want to point and say, there, but I am telling this in my own voice so I don't have to live inside anyone else's blame map. This is a story about arithmetic and faith, about the tiny rebellions required to keep a toddler in clean socks, and about how dignity is not the absence of need, but the insistence on truth even inside it. This is about selling rings, to buy time. It is also about what people call you when you refuse to disappear. Because here's the thing. When I finally scraped together enough to cover the daycare balance, I walked in with a gratitude so sharp, it felt like a second spine. Miss Angela, the director, met me in her office where the walls are lined with cheerful handprint turkeys and safety certificates framed like diplomas. She is the kind of woman who believes in actually seeing the people in front of her, which in itself is a small miracle. She took the money, printed a new statement, and said, "We're good for another month. And Rachel, if you ever need a resources list, I can connect you." When I tell you I almost cried, I mean I had to swallow my own heart twice. But relief has enemies. It invites questions in the places you can't afford to be questioned. It also invites opinions from people who have never had to disassemble their jewelry to keep a roof over their child's smile. You don't notice them at first. They're polite. They wear kindness like a scarf. Then they lean in and say, "You should have budgeted better." Or, "Why not ask your family?" Or, and this is the one that burrowed under my skin and made a home there, "You're always making a big deal of things. It's like you want to be a victim." I did not scream. I did not throw the truth like a glass. I did what women like me do. I went home and taped the latest artwork from Jonah, a green blob he swears is a tractor, to the fridge, and I asked the quiet room if survival counts if no one claps. If you're watching this, if you found me in the maze of the internet where we pretend we're not lonely, I want to invite you into the rest of this story. I'm going to tell you about the neighbor who banged pots against our wall at 9 p.m. and called management when my son had a night terror. I'm going to tell you about the HR manager who spoke in policy, not people. I'm going to tell you about the day I realized the narrative around single mothers is a weapon we're expected to hand to our critics. I'm going to tell you how I learned to put it down. Before we go further, do me a favor. Subscribe if stories like this matter to you, because I'm not the only one living them. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to picture the rooms we're sitting in together. The kitchen table in Cleveland, the bus stop in Austin, the break room in Portland where the microwave always smells like someone else's lunch. Tell me your city, your corner of the world, your sky. I'm here in Riverbend, where the train shrieks at 2:14 a.m. and paints a line across the night like a reminder. Movement is still possible. The first call out came at work. Our new bakery manager, a woman named Caro with immaculate nails and a voice like a closed window, called me into the office after the morning rush. She sat behind the desk with the employee manual spread open like a legal code. "Rachel," she started, smiling the way people smile right before they hand you a bill. "Attendance has been inconsistent." "Daycare," I said, my mouth already apologizing. "I've been sorting it. We're back on track." "I hear you," she said, not hearing me. "But this is a place of business. We can't have last-minute call-ins." She folded her hands. The gesture was theatrical. "I noticed on your social you posted about selling your rings. That's dramatic." I felt my face heat, the way it does when you step from shade to sun without warning. "It happened," I said. "It paid for care." I was relieved. She tilted her head. "There's a pattern here, Rachel. It's like you're—" She stopped, searching for a word she could say without HR biting. "Centered in crisis. It reads as victim energy." I inhaled so sharply it scratched my throat. Victim energy. As if an instinct to narrate survival is a costume you wear to cheat a costume contest. I thought about Jonah's small hand curved around my thumb, how he sometimes squeezes twice, his language for "I love you," because we read a book that said twice means yes. I thought about the pawn shop bell, thin and apologetic when I left. I show up, I said. I bake. I cover. I'm never late on a bake. She slid a form across the desk. We're formalizing expectations. 3 write-ups and we'll have to reconsider your fit here. And then, because the devil is detail-oriented, she added, you have such potential. But personal choices are personal. We prefer not to make a spectacle out of them. I signed the paper like I was signing a confession. I walked out and braided my anger into something quiet enough to carry, but anger likes to multiply. On the bus ride home, a woman in a mustard coat scrolled through headlines about budgets, deficits, and families. She clucked her tongue. People have kids they can't afford and expect sympathy, she announced to no one, and everyone. I pressed my forehead to the fogged glass and counted the passing streetlights, tiny moons on sticks puppeting the dark, then the building. You don't realize how thin your walls are until your life is loud enough to test them. Jonah's night terrors started the week his dad forgot to call on his birthday. He doesn't remember the forgetting. Not exactly. It's like his body does the remembering for him. He wakes up howling at a dream only he can see, and I say his name like a spell. One night, he was inconsolable, screaming with the consistency of a fire alarm, and I was pacing the room with him, counting in tens, when the neighbor banged. Not a knock, a percussion. Pots or pans from the angle and the metallic ring of it. "Quiet!" he shouted through the wall. "Some of us have work." As if I didn't. I knocked back on purpose, gently, the way you tap an aquarium to see if anything moves. "We're trying," I called, and in that moment I wanted a second pair of arms to hold my boy so I could hold my ground. The banging resumed, a rhythm meant to humiliate. I could see the memo to building management writing itself. The next day there was a notice on my door about quiet hours and consideration for community. It had the building logo at the top like a wax seal on a decree. I held it in one hand, and Jonah's toothbrush in the other, and I thought about how much of my life was spent proving that I deserved to be where I already was. It didn't stop there. Family chimed in with advice trimmed in thorns. My mother, who loves me, who would cut off her own hand if it would help, suggested I move back home for stability, which is a word that turns in your mouth like a stone. My sister asked, in the voice of someone auditioning for sainthood, whether I'd tried communicating my needs better. An aunt texted an article about learned helplessness with a note, "Not you exactly, but interesting." And an old friend from college messaged out of nowhere to say she was starting a podcast on resilience mindset and would love to feature my journey. I left her on read because the last thing I wanted to be was someone else's content. At daycare pickup, a father, clean, rested, shirt crisp with a logo that pays, asked, "So, did you really sell your rings?" He said it like we were exchanging recipes. I nodded. He whistled low. "Man, that's a choice." I put Jonah's jacket on with fingers that wanted to be fists. Later, at the park, a woman I barely knew offered me a church's number and asked if I'd considered defaulting less to struggle. She touched my arm like she needed to leave a fingerprint. "Sometimes people get addicted to hardship," she said. I imagined signing up for a 12-step program called I Survived Again Today and wondered about the sponsor I'd be assigned. Some saint who never had to. Meanwhile, payday was the kind of thin you can see daylight through. I kept a ledger like a wartime quartermaster. Rent, electric, bus pass, daycare, groceries. I erased and re-added and discovered that numbers can bruise. When I asked HR about a modest raise, they said, "Merit cycle is in Q4. When I asked about swapping one early shift for a later one so I could walk Jonah to daycare and avoid another late fee, they said schedules are set by demand. Demand. As if I were a bakery product and someone kept ordering my scarcity. The word victim gathered around me like a swarm every time I changed the narrative to survival. Don't be dramatic, they said, while living drama-free. Don't center yourself, they said, while putting themselves in the front row of every story. In the grocery aisle, I shelved baguettes that cost more than a day of my bus fare, and I learned new synonyms for quiet: compliance, gratitude, professionalism. I practiced smiling in mirrors so I could pass. It happened on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and baking sugar. Caro had posted the new schedule and moved me to a string of nights, which meant I'd need to beg a neighbor to watch Jonah or pay a teenager who liked him but liked TikTok more. I told Caro this wasn't sustainable. She said, "Everything is a choice. like she'd found the universe's backdoor key. I tucked the new hours in my apron and walked home with the air pressing on my chest like a hand. When I got to daycare, the lobby was crowded. Clipboard signouts, cubbies with names written in Sharpie, toddlers staggering under the weight of their backpacks like tiny warriors. Ms. Angela asked if I had a minute. My heart stumbled. We stepped into her office. She was kind, which somehow made everything feel harsher. "We had a complaint," she said. "A parent posted on the neighborhood group about unstable families and linked your post about selling your rings. I took it down, but it spread." The word group landed like a stone dropped in a shallow pond. I'd seen those threads. Sanctimony dressed up in civic concern. "What does that mean for us?" I asked. "Meaning me and Jonah? A country of two," she sighed. "Nothing immediate. We don't discriminate. But I need you to know the climate. People don't like to be reminded how thin the margin is between their life and someone else's." I nodded. Thin margin, like a cliff edge disguised as a sidewalk. I thanked her for telling me, because politeness is a profession I never chose but keep doing. When I stepped back into the lobby, Jonah was barreling toward me, cheeks flushed, a paper crown listing on his head. "Mommy, we made castles," he shouted. I felt my face learn how to be joy while my stomach learned how to be a knot. On the walk home, the sky opened with a soft, steady rain. We ran the last block, laughing only because running made us sound like we were laughing. The hallway smelled like someone's soup. Our neighbor's door was open a crack. I could hear the TV murmuring politics to no one in particular. I unlocked our door, set our bags down, peeled Jonah out of his wet jacket, and then, because no day ends quiet, it happened. He spilled his cup of milk, took one look at the spreading white, and began to scream the way children do when a small catastrophe stands in for a larger one they can't name. I scooped him up, rocking, shushing, whispering every script I know by heart. It didn't help. He arched his back, flung his head, pounded his little heels on my thighs. I could feel my patience wobble like a wheel with one lug nut missing. That's when the pounding began. Pots against the wall. Again. Metallic. Deliberate. A percussion of contempt. "Quiet!" our neighbor shouted. "Get it together!" The last word knifed the air. Get it together. The building facade of quiet hours hovered like a judge with a gavel. I felt something in me unspool. Carefully, I laid Jonah on the couch with his stuffed truck and his still wet crown, and I walked into the kitchen. I took our one good pan from the cabinet and held it. It was dented, second-hand, and honest. I did not bang back. Not once. Instead, I set it on the stove, turned on the burner, and said out loud, in a voice I didn't recognize, "Enough." I pulled out my phone and opened the neighborhood group. The thread about unstable families was there, a vine snaking down the page, lush with gossip. Screenshots of my post, strangers laundered in concern. Is the daycare safe if they have people like this? This is attention-seeking behavior. She's playing the victim. I clicked comment. My hands were steady, the kind of steady that comes when a storm has finally decided to break. "My name is Rachel," I typed. "I live in 2B. I sold 2 rings I no longer needed to pay for the care my son absolutely does. If you want to debate budgets, come bake bread with me at 5 a.m. If you want to talk about victimhood, please know that turning your back on a problem doesn't make you a hero. It makes you lucky. I'm not a cautionary tale. I'm your neighbor. And the next time you use my life as a prop, I hope you do it with my name in your mouth, and the decency to say it to my face." I hit post. Within minutes, replies. Some soft, some barbed. A few said thank you. A few said nothing and clicked away to whatever made them feel cleaner. One name I recognized, the neighbor with the pots, wrote, "People like you always make the most noise." I stared at the words, at the way "people like you" tries to shrink you to a cardboard cutout. My phone buzzed with a text from Caro reminding me about the night shift. I ignored it. For once, I let the noise belong to me. Then came the knock. Not the pots. A knock. I opened the door to find Ms. Angela, raincoat damp at the shoulders. "I saw your post," she said simply. I brought over the resource sheet, but I also brought something else. From her bag, she pulled a small envelope with the Daycare logo. "This is a scholarship application. We reserve it for families who don't fit the usual boxes but whose kids make this place better. It won't cover everything, but it helps. I'm not promising anything. I'm offering away." I took it like it might disappear. My throat closed up, My eyes flooded. Jonah, crown askew, peeked from behind the couch. "Miss Angela!" he squealed. She waved. The hallway light flickered like it was maybe finally on our side. Down the hall, a door opened. The neighbor with the pot stepped out. A man in his 50s with ex-military posture and eyes that didn't blink enough. He looked at Miss Angela, at me, at the crown on my kid's head. Something, maybe shame, maybe boredom, clicked in his face. He cleared his throat. "Listen," he said, voice rough. "I shouldn't have hit the wall. My mom—" He stopped, rearranged his sentence like furniture. "I was tired. I shouldn't have done it." It wasn't a full apology. It was a crack. I took it. "Thank you," I said. "I'll do my best." I didn't say, "We're trying." I didn't say, "It's hard." I didn't explain night terrors or birthdays missed. For once, I let the silence be the bridge. I didn't get the scholarship immediately. Life is not a montage. There were forms and pay stubs and a meeting where I said the word need without whispering. I kept working nights for 3 weeks, trading shifts, bribing the teenager with extra pizza, and leaving little notes for Jonah that said, "Back before breakfast." I met with HR again and asked for a pathway up that wasn't paved with condescension. They gave me more hours on the ovens and fewer on the register, which meant I could hide when necessary and heal when possible. It wasn't a revolution. It was a degree. Sometimes degrees change a climate. The neighborhood thread quieted. People found other bonfires. Ms. Angela called one afternoon and said, "Good news. Partial award." I sat on the kitchen floor and pressed my forehead to my knees. Jonah crawled into my lap like a small son and asked if we could make castles again. "We can make anything," I said, meaning it. As for the rings, Terry at the pawn shop kept the ticket safe, but the 30 days came and went. I didn't go back for them. That surprised me more than anyone could know. I thought I would ache for them like phantom limbs, but they were tools of a story that ended. I needed tools for this one. So I bought a second-hand stroller that didn't wobble, and a set of child-sized noise-canceling headphones for when the world got loud, and a new pan, a good one, heavy enough to be believed. I learned to measure my life in acts of refusal that looked small from the outside, refusing to apologize for needing help, refusing to explain my value in a language that discounts it, refusing to let other people narrate my motherhood like a cautionary fable. I practiced a different word than victim. Not hero. God, no. I'm suspicious of heroes. The word I landed on was witness. I witness my own life. I tell it so it doesn't get stolen. Sometimes I still hear the accusation, playing the victim, rustle in the corner of a room when I speak plainly. It used to make me smaller. Now, on good days, it makes me bright, because the only people who benefit from my silence are the ones who profit from a world where survival is treated like a scandal. I do not need their permission to breathe. If you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with me in the tender and the true. If you're a single parent who has ever sold a piece of your past to buy your child a safer present, I see you. If you are someone who used to roll your eyes at stories like mine, I invite you to try something radical. Listen without rehearsing your rebuttal. Ask what it takes to build a society where a mother doesn't have to trade her rings for childcare, where the floor is sturdy enough to hold us all. The conspiracy, if there is one, is simpler than you think. It's the belief that quiet people are easier to govern. Let's be loud in our love instead. I'm Rachel, and I'm not playing anything. I'm living. I'm baking bread at dawn and braiding hair after bath time and filling out forms and choosing every day to be more than someone else's headline. If this story held a mirror to your own, subscribe so we can keep one another honest. And tell me where you're watching from. Your city, your corner, your sky. I want to imagine you there, hands warm around a mug, light slanting across your table, a window open to whatever is next. We'll meet here again, in the bright and the hard, and we'll keep saying the names of what we need out loud until the walls learn to listen.